Welcome to the life-changing power of living with less, Virtual Living Guide, an audiobook crafted by Liberty, Audiobook. Have you ever looked around your living room, perhaps at the crowded shelves, the overflowing closets, or the packed garage, and felt a very specific kind of heaviness? It is not just the dusty cardboard boxes or the physical clutter that weighs on us. More profoundly, it is the invisible clutter inside your mind, the exhausting daily schedule, the constant pressure to achieve, to acquire, to compare. It is the feeling that your own world has become incredibly tight, stifling the very peace and clarity you crave. For too long, society has confidently told us a dangerous myth, that a successful life is a full life. We were taught we needed to do more, buy more, accumulate more achievements, more status, more possessions, more stimulation, more everything, and we believed it. We spent grueling years building our lives, filling our homes with things, and our calendars with endless obligations. Yet, in the middle of all this abundance, something essential has quietly slipped away: peace, clarity, and meaning. We have built lives full of things, but often empty of purpose. We have filled our calendars, but starved our souls, chasing the life we thought would bring us joy. Only to realize joy was never found in the chase, but in the ability to finally slow down, see clearly, and choose intentionally. Perhaps you have found yourself waking up on a quiet morning, feeling completely overwhelmed before your feet even touch the bedroom floor, your tired brain exhausted from managing so much noise. This is not a sign of a full life, it is a sign of a cluttered one. We honestly believe the answer is finding a better way to organize the mess, buying more storage bins, or fiercely managing our time. But you cannot organize your way out of a fundamentally overloaded life. The only way to finally catch your breath, to reclaim your essence, is to consciously choose to carry less. This is where the profound, almost magical healing power hidden inside the simple phrase "less is more" comes into play. It might sound confusing. How can having less of something actually mean having more? It is like saying the less chocolate cake I eat, the more satisfied I feel, which sounds like a downright lie. But stick with me. There is a lot more to this simple idea than meets the eye, or in our case, the stomach. Simplicity is not about deprivation. It is not about owning nothing, escaping society, or rejecting ambition. Simplicity is about deciding what deserves space in your life and what does not. It is about removing the noise so the signal becomes obvious. It is about choosing quality over quantity, depth over distraction, and fulfillment over accumulation. When less becomes intentional, less becomes powerful. It means finding what enough means for you, and then gently, deliberately building your life around that center. In this audiobook, we will explore how subtracting the unnecessary creates room for what is truly valuable. We will learn how to reclaim our attention, protect our time, refine our priorities, simplify our environment, and build a life that feels lighter to carry and richer to live. You will discover that simplicity is not just a lifestyle. It is a mindset, a discipline, and ultimately, a philosophy for freedom. It is the secret to clarity and liberty, not squeezing more into the day, but letting go of the clutter, of the noise, of the belief that our worth is measured by busyness. The chapters ahead will give you practical tools, real strategies, and timeless principles to master the magic of a simple life where you are no longer overwhelmed by everything around you, but guided by what truly matters within you. This journey is about redesigning your life from the inside out, moving from distraction to direction, from clutter to clarity. Your simpler, more spacious life begins now. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Modern Disease of More. Why we are drowning in abundance. Life has a way of piling up on us, when we are not paying attention. Not all at once, but little by little, task by task, notification by notification, expectation by expectation. And before we know it, we are not living our lives anymore. We are managing them. We are reacting to whatever comes at us, instead of directing where we want to go. It feels normal because everyone around us seems to be struggling the same way. But just because something is common does not mean it is okay. Being overwhelmed is not a sign of a full life. It is a sign of a cluttered one. It is the modern disease of more. Imagine your desk as a battlefield. 23 browser tabs fighting for attention while your phone buzzes with the 14th notification this hour. 3 half-finished projects sprawl across your workspace, each demanding completion yesterday. Your calendar bleeds into evening hours packed with meetings that spawn more meetings. Sound familiar? You are drowning in the modern disease of more. More apps, more commitments, more stuff, more choices. Every addition promises to solve your problems, but instead creates new ones. The very tools meant to simplify your life have become the chaos consuming it. This chapter exposes the real enemy, excess itself, not just physical clutter, but the invisible weight of digital overload, decision fatigue, and commitment sprawl. Subtraction, not addition, becomes your secret weapon for reclaiming focus, time, and sanity. This pervasive sense of overwhelm happens when everything tries to matter at the same time. Every email, every message, every responsibility, every option, every request, every headline, everything demands your immediate attention. And when everything demands your attention, you end up giving your attention to nothing meaningful. You feel busy but not productive, active but not fulfilled, stimulated but not satisfied. It is exhaustion without progress, and that is the trap. You can spend years in motion without ever moving forward. The first step toward a simpler, freer life is not buying fewer things or cleaning out closets. The first step is stopping the automatic flood of demands on your time, attention, and energy. You must interrupt the pattern of reacting to everything and start choosing what is worth responding to. That requires awareness. It requires the ability to pause. It requires you to ask yourself a simple but powerful question. Is this important, or is it just loud? Loud things overwhelm you. Important things grow you. When you stop letting life overwhelm you, you begin to notice something interesting. Not everything needs your involvement. Not everything deserves your worry. Not every problem is yours to carry. Some problems belong to time. Some belong to other people. And some were never problems to begin with. They were just noise. You also start to realize that many of the things that overwhelm you exist only because you never questioned them. You accepted every invitation. You agreed to every responsibility. You held on to every expectation. You said yes when you should have said no. Overwhelm is rarely something life does to you. More often, it is something you allow by default. That may sound uncomfortable, but it is actually good news, because if you allowed it, you can also change it. Stopping overwhelm does not require perfect discipline. It requires ownership. Ownership of your time, ownership of your choices, ownership of your boundaries. Without ownership, your life belongs to other people's priorities, other people's urgency, and other people's desires. With ownership, your life becomes yours again. And when life becomes yours again, things begin to simplify naturally. Now, here is the part most people miss. Simplicity is not about having less to manage. It is about having less that needs managing. There is a big difference. You can declutter your home and still have a cluttered mind. You can delete apps and still have a chaotic calendar. You can organize your tasks and still feel emotionally overloaded. The real work happens inside. It happens when you choose what really matters and release what does not. When life stops overwhelming you, you gain something extremely valuable: mental breathing room. Space to think, space to feel, space to make better decisions, space to actually live instead of just cope, space to hear yourself again. That space is where simplicity begins, and more importantly, where fulfillment grows. Chapter 2. Enoughness. Defining your personal finish line. The billionaire sits in his empty mansion, surrounded by rooms he never enters, owning cars he never drives. The entrepreneur juggles 17 projects, finishing none. The minimalist owns 3 shirts, but spends hours deciding which one to wear. What do they all have in common? They never learned the most liberating word in any language. Enough. Enoughness is not about deprivation, it is about precision. It is the difference between wandering in circles and walking a straight line to your destination. Most people live in the gray zone of maybe more, never knowing when they have won because they never defined what winning looks like. This chapter reveals the hidden power of personal limits, not the suffocating kind imposed by others, but the liberating boundaries you choose for yourself. You will discover why the most successful people in history were not those who accumulated the most, but those who knew exactly how much was enough and stopped there. Without caps, you cannot win because the finish line keeps moving. Every achievement becomes the starting point for the next craving. You get the promotion, then want the corner office. You clear your inbox, then feel anxious when 3 new emails arrive. This is not a character flaw, it is how your brain is wired. Hedonic adaptation ensures that yesterday's luxury becomes today's baseline. The dopamine hit from acquiring something new fades quickly, leaving you right back where you started, only with more stuff to manage. Meanwhile, decision fatigue compounds as each new possession, commitment, or option demands mental energy to maintain, organize, or choose between. The cruel irony is that abundance creates scarcity. More clothes mean more decisions about what to wear. More apps mean more notifications competing for attention. More projects mean less focus for any single one. The very things meant to give you options end up stealing your freedom to choose what matters. Enoughness breaks this cycle by converting vague desire into concrete design. Instead of "I want to be more organized," you decide, "I keep 10 apps on my phone." Instead of "I should focus better," you commit to 3 active projects maximum. The shift from wishful thinking to numerical precision transforms everything. Thinkers throughout history, from the ancient Greeks to modern minimalists, have sung the praises of simplicity and enoughness. Consider Epicurus, an ancient philosopher who loved simplicity. He believed that the key to happiness was enjoying simple pleasures. For him, a good day involved a loaf of bread, some water, and a nice chat with friends. No need for expensive wines or fancy dinners. He found joy in the simple things, like the taste of plain bread and the sound of laughter. In a way, Epicurus was the original less is more advocate. He thought that by limiting our desires and not craving luxurious things, we could find true happiness. You would not find him scrolling through an ancient equivalent of Instagram, envying the rich and famous. He was too busy enjoying his simple meals and deep thoughts. The Stoics, too, believed that true happiness comes from within, not from material possessions. They preached that by limiting our desires, we can avoid the pain of unfulfilled wants. After all, if you do not want much, you are never disappointed. They were like the ancient equivalent of those people who have their entire lives in one backpack and go on about how freeing it is. The Buddha also had a thing for simplicity. He taught about the middle path, which is all about finding balance, not going overboard with luxury, but also not living like a hermit. He left his royal life behind to discover that neither extreme luxury nor extreme austerity leads to happiness. Instead, he advocated for a life of moderation. Imagine Buddha at a buffet with endless options. He would probably take a bit of salad, a scoop of rice, and a piece of fruit, just enough to enjoy but not so much that he would need a nap afterwards. The middle path is like choosing a practical, fuel-efficient car over a flashy sports car. You get where you need to go without the extra cost and stress. These ancient philosophies, echoed in modern minimalism, remind us that true wealth is simply the absence of worry. As long as you are constantly craving the next external reward, you are secretly living in a state of poverty. You are always lacking something. But the very second you look around your living room and decide that you finally have enough, you become instantly wealthy. You stop living in the imaginary future. You start enjoying the ordinary, breathing reality of right now. The architecture of satisfaction operates on two levels: floors and ceilings. Floors protect what you need to function: 7 hours of sleep, 1 hour of unplugged time daily, enough savings to cover 3 months of expenses. These are not suggestions. They are non-negotiables that safeguard your foundation. Ceilings prevent sprawl. 5 work outfits, 6 meetings per week, 10 apps on your phone. These upper limits seem restrictive until you experience their liberating power. When you know your ceiling, every decision becomes binary. Does this fit within my cap or not? No more agonizing over whether you need something. The boundary decides for you. The magic happens in the space between floor and ceiling. This is your zone of intentional choice, where you operate with clarity rather than compulsion. You are not depriving yourself. You are designing a life that serves your goals, rather than enslaving you to endless maintenance. Monthly audits keep you honest. Set a recurring reminder to count what you have accumulated and recommit to your limits. This is not about perfection. It is about awareness. When you notice drift, you course correct immediately, rather than waiting for chaos to force your hand. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Impact. Identifying your vital few. A master archer does not aim at 10 targets simultaneously. They choose one, draw back the bow, and release with devastating precision. Yet, most people approach their goals like they are at a carnival shooting gallery, firing wildly in all directions, hoping something will hit. The word essential comes from the Latin essentia, meaning to be. Essentials are not just important things. They are the things that define your very existence, the activities that make you who you are becoming. Everything else is decoration, distraction, or delusion. This chapter reveals the hidden mathematics of achievement, not the complex formulas taught in business school, but the elegant simplicity that governs all breakthrough results. You will discover why the most successful people are not those who do the most things, but those who identify the few things that matter most and eliminate everything else with surgical precision. This is the concentration principle. When everything is a priority, nothing is. This is not motivational fluff. It is cognitive science. Your brain's working memory can hold roughly 7 items at once, and that is under ideal conditions. When you are stressed, tired, or distracted, that number drops to 3 or 4. Try to focus on 10 goals simultaneously, and you guarantee that none will receive the attention required for breakthrough results. The mathematics are unforgiving. If you split your attention equally among 10 projects, each receives 10% of your mental bandwidth. But attention does not scale linearly. It compounds. Give one project 50% of your focus, and it does not just get 5 times more attention than the 10% projects. It gets exponentially more quality thinking, deeper insights, and faster momentum. This is why the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, appears everywhere from business revenue to personal productivity. 20% of your activities typically generate 80% of your results. The remaining 80% of your efforts produce only 20% of your outcomes. Most people know this intellectually, but continue spreading themselves thin, afraid that focusing means missing out. The fear is backwards. Missing out on noise is exactly how you hear the signal. When you eliminate the trivial many, the vital few emerge with crystal clarity. Your energy stops dissipating across multiple fronts and begins concentrating into a force capable of moving mountains. The architecture of impact operates at 3 levels: outcomes, systems, and actions. Most people confuse these levels, which explains why their efforts scatter rather than compound. Understanding the hierarchy changes everything. Outcomes represent your quarterly destinations, the measurable results that will fundamentally shift your trajectory. These are not daily tasks or weekly habits. They are the big moves that, once completed, make everything else easier or unnecessary. Think launch the new product line or establish the strategic partnership rather than send 5 emails or attend 3 networking events. Systems are the repeatable processes that generate outcomes reliably. While outcomes are destinations, systems are the vehicles that get you there. A system might be publish one high-value piece of content weekly or conduct free customer interviews monthly. Systems create predictable progress toward outcomes without requiring constant decision-making about what to do next. Actions are the specific weekly behaviors that feed your systems and drive your outcomes. These are concrete, measurable activities you can complete in a single session. Write the introduction to the white paper. Schedule interviews with 5 potential customers, or create the pricing model spreadsheet. Actions without outcomes become busy work. Outcomes without actions remain fantasies. The magic happens when you align all 3 levels around a small number of commanding objectives. Instead of juggling dozens of disconnected tasks, you create a focused hierarchy where every action serves a system and every system drives an outcome. Chapter 4. The Subtractive Art. Releasing what does not serve you. Once you decide what truly matters, the next challenge is clearing out everything that does not. And this is where most lives stay cluttered. Not because people do not know what they want, but because they do not remove what stands in the way. We tend to think simplification is about addition, adding better habits, adding routines, adding new strategies. But simplicity has always been a subtractive art. It is about removing, eliminating, cutting away, and letting go. When you stop trying to carry everything, life becomes lighter by design. The things that do not serve you show up in many forms. Some are obvious, like toxic relationships or time-wasting habits. Others are subtle, like outdated beliefs, hidden expectations, unnecessary obligations, and goals you no longer genuinely care about, but continue to pursue out of habit, ego, or fear of disappointing others. Life becomes complicated not because we keep seeking joy, but because we keep holding on to everything we have outgrown. Start by looking at where your time goes. Time is the clearest indicator of what is consuming your life. You may discover that you are investing hours in activities that drain you, commitments that do not matter, and distractions that steal your attention without giving anything meaningful in return. Not everything that is enjoyable is valuable, and not everything that is valuable is enjoyable. But when something consumes your life without contributing to it, it becomes a thief, and thieves must be removed. Then look at your mental environment. What beliefs, stories, and assumptions clutter your mind? Maybe you are holding on to guilt about saying no. Maybe you believe productivity must always feel stressful. Maybe you think success means doing more instead of doing what actually moves the needle. Some beliefs served you once, but they do not serve you anymore. They belong to an older version of you, a version who did not know what you know now. Growth requires updates, and updates often begin with unlearning. There is also emotional clutter. Old resentments, grudges, comparisons, and attachments that consume energy quietly in the background. Emotional clutter is heavy because it takes space even when you are not actively thinking about it. You can go about your day pretending you are fine, but the emotional load weighs you down like an invisible backpack. Letting go is not just a poetic idea, it is a practical strategy for reclaiming capacity. You cannot carry both old pain and new possibility. One must be released for the other to arrive. Consider my friend Bob. Back in the 1980s, Bob was a legendary high school football coach in his hometown, the absolute king of Friday night lights. He spent decades pacing the sidelines in the freezing autumn rain. When he finally retired, he retreated down into his dark, unfinished basement. That basement was a complete shrine to a life that no longer existed. It was packed to the ceiling with rusty gold trophies, massive cardboard boxes filled with old leather playbooks, and faded varsity jackets. Bob would spend hours down there, just sitting in the damp air, running his hands over the engraved metal plates, staring at teen photos from 1985. He was completely trapped in the heavy gravity of his own past. He kept all that stuff because he was secretly terrified of the present. He believed that if he threw away the trophies, he would throw away his own importance. He was letting his old ego completely dictate his retirement. Clinging to your past glory is an incredibly lonely way to live. Bob was so obsessed with being a great coach 30 years ago that he was failing at being a great grandfather today. He would sit at the dinner table with his young grandkids, but his mind was always wandering back to those old championship games. The heavy objects in his basement were not preserving his beautiful memories. They were acting like massive iron anchors. They pulled him under. So, one weekend, Bob finally made a terribly painful choice. He grabbed a roll of heavy trash bags and walked down the wooden stairs. He did not throw away his history. He just carefully selected one small, meaningful photograph to keep on his desk. He took a deep breath and bravely donated the rest of the dusty jackets and rusty trophies to the local high school. He surrendered his old ego. Emptying out that dark basement finally created enough empty space in his heart to focus entirely on the little boy sitting right across from him. True decluttering is not about discarding your precious past. It is about unchaining yourself from it, clearing away the heavy anchors so you can actually sail in the present moment. And then, of course, there are people. Not every person you meet in life is meant to stay. Some relationships are meant for a season, others are meant for a lesson, and a rare few are meant for life. The problem is, when we hold on to seasonal relationships as if they are lifelong assignments. There are people who once supported you but now limit you, people who once inspired you but now drain you, people who once shared your path but now resist your growth. Removing what does not serve you sometimes means redefining relationships, not with cruelty, but with clarity. Removing what does not serve you can feel uncomfortable at first. It might feel harsh, it might feel selfish, it might feel unfamiliar. But simplicity is not about being harsh or selfish, it is about being aligned. You were not designed to carry every responsibility, every expectation, every obligation, and every person who crosses your path. You were designed to choose, and choosing requires letting go. There is another layer to removal that people often overlook: removing opportunities. Opportunities are praised in modern culture. People say, never say no to opportunity. But the truth is, too many opportunities are just distractions disguised as progress. Not every open door leads somewhere worth going. One of the most mature forms of wisdom is to stop chasing everything that shines and start selecting only what fits your direction. Every time you remove something that does not serve you, you create space. And space is a powerful asset. Space gives you room to think, room to breathe, room to redirect your efforts into what matters. Space gives your values actual territory to exist in. Without space, even good things suffocate. With space, even a few meaningful things can flourish. This removal process does not need to happen overnight. It does not need to be dramatic. It simply needs to be honest. You do not remove things because you dislike them. You remove them because they do not support the life you want to build. There is a difference. And that difference is what turns simplicity from an aesthetic into a philosophy. At some point, you realize that a simpler life is not created by adding more. It is created by removing the unnecessary. It is created by releasing what once felt important but now feels heavy. It is created by embracing the courage to walk away from what no longer aligns with your values. Removing what does not serve you is not the end of freedom. It is the beginning of it. Chapter 5. A Conscious Curator's Guide. Keeping fewer, choosing better. A simple life is not defined by having nothing. It is defined by having the right things. When you keep fewer but choose better, you stop drowning in the noise of excess and start thriving in the richness of quality. Most people do not suffer from a lack of options. They suffer from an overload of them. Too many choices, too many possessions, too many projects, too many goals, too many social circles, too many opinions, too many demands for their attention. And yet very few of these choices contribute meaningfully to their peace, their growth, or their fulfillment. Quality is a function of selection. When you choose better, you do not need more. You do not need 5 mediocre friendships when 2 deeply aligned ones give you more support, more meaning, and more connection. You do not need a closet full of clothes you do not wear when a handful of well-chosen pieces make you feel confident and ready. You do not need 20 goals competing for your energy when 3 well-chosen ones will transform your life. The paradox is simple. When you raise your standards, your demand for quantity naturally decreases. But to choose better, you have to know what better means to you. Better does not mean more expensive, more luxurious, or more prestigious. It means more aligned. More aligned with your values, your priorities, your identity, and the life you want to build. Better means things that add to your days instead of cluttering them. Better means things that move you forward instead of holding you in place. Better means things that serve you instead of owning you. Choosing better also means choosing deliberately. Many people choose reactively. They buy because it is on sale. They say yes because they feel obligated. They commit because it looks impressive. They collect responsibilities because everyone else seems to. But deliberate choosing means asking questions before you acquire or commit. Why do I want this? Do I actually need this? Will I use this? Does this align with what matters to me? Even pausing long enough to ask these questions will change what you bring into your life. My friend Paul fell directly into this trap. When he first retired, he genuinely thought he needed massive new hobbies just to stay relevant. So, he started buying the absolute best equipment money could buy. He bought $2,000 golf clubs that he used exactly 3 times. He ordered expensive, heavy-duty gardening tools that ended up gathering dust in the corner of his garage. He was aggressively trying to purchase a brand new personality. Within a few short months, the narrow hallway near his front door was completely impassable. It was constantly blocked, a towering mountain of brown boxes with black smiley faces on them. Paul thought he was treating himself to a luxurious retirement, but the terrible reality was he was just buying brand new obligations. Every single heavy box he carried inside was another expensive thing he had to actively clean, maintain, and worry about. He was suffocating under his own prime delivery habit. He was drowning. He was spending thousands of dollars just to dramatically increase his own blood pressure. One chilly Saturday morning, Paul was trying to find his old winter boots in the garage. He physically tripped over a massive box of untouched golf balls. He sat there on the cold concrete floor, rubbing his knee, and finally saw the sheer madness of it all. He was not collecting hobbies. He was just aggressively hoarding stress. We have this terrible misconception about the word minimalism. We honestly think it means moving into an empty white room and taking a strict vow of poverty. True minimalism is not a rigid, punishing set of rules. It is simply the beautiful pursuit of clarity. It is having the immense courage to look at your credit card statement and realize that excess stuff is literally stealing your peace. Paul did not just throw away the golf clubs. He picked up his tablet and permanently deleted the shopping app right off his home screen. He was done. He established one brilliant, incredibly simple rule for the rest of his life. Before he brings a single new object into his home, he asks himself one brutal question. Is this thing actually going to pay rent for the mental space it will occupy? If the answer is no, he just walks away. He leaves it on the shelf. Letting go of the desperate urge to consume instantly frees up massive amounts of space in your mind. The same principle of choosing better applies beyond possessions. It applies to activities. Not every activity deserves space on your calendar. Many people are busy, but not effective. Their days are crowded with filler things that make them feel active, but do not make their lives richer. Choosing better means building days filled with high-value activities. Deep work instead of busy work, conversation instead of chatter, learning instead of scrolling, experiences instead of consumption, rest instead of burnout disguised as productivity. Relationships also benefit from the fewer but better approach. Social quantity is easily overestimated. We are conditioned to believe more friends equal a more fulfilling life. But fulfillment hath not come from being widely known. It comes from being deeply understood. When you invest in fewer relationships, you create depth, you create trust, you create shared meaning. Shallow connections drain energy because they require performance. Deep connections replenish energy because they allow authenticity. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Access is earned, and it should be rare. When you choose better goals, something interesting happens. You stop competing and start building. Many people chase goals that do not belong to them, goals inherited from culture, family, or ego. They work hard for achievements they do not genuinely care about, and then feel strangely empty when they reach them. Better goals are not based on appearances. They are based on alignment. They energize you instead of draining you. They transform you instead of distracting you. They reward you with meaning instead of applause. Choosing better also affects your environment. A cluttered environment creates a cluttered mind. Every object takes a small amount of attention. Every unfinished project takes a mental bookmark. Every unnecessary possession takes space that could be used for something more meaningful, or for nothing, which is sometimes even more valuable. Space itself is not emptiness. Space is potential. When you own fewer things, the things you own are easier to appreciate, maintain, and enjoy. But here is the deeper truth. Choosing better is a continuous practice, not a one-time decision. Your needs evolve. Your tastes evolve. Your priorities evolve. What was better for you 3 years ago might not be better for you now. A simple life stays simple because it gets recalibrated. When life feels heavy, it is often a sign that your calibration is overdue. Choosing better also demands patience. Quality rarely appears quickly. Deep relationships take time. Skill mastery takes time. Meaningful goals take time. Acting slowly in a world obsessed with speed feels rebellious, but in the most liberating way. When you choose better, You are no longer impressed by how fast you acquire things. You are impressed by how deeply you experience them. Ultimately, keeping fewer and choosing better is an act of self-respect. It says, "My life is too valuable to fill with things that do not matter." It says, "I am allowed to be selective." It says, "I would rather have a life that is deep, meaningful, and aligned than one that is crowded, busy, and hollow." And in a world that urges you to accumulate endlessly, that kind of selectiveness is not only powerful, it is revolutionary. Chapter 6. Time as Your True Wealth. Reclaiming your non-renewable currency. Money is often treated as the main currency of life. But if we look closer, the most valuable currency you have never sits in your bank account. It sits on your calendar. Time is the one resource you can never earn back once it is spent. You can lose money and regain it. You can lose possessions and replace them. You can lose opportunities and find new ones. But when you lose time, it is gone. And yet, strangely, time is the currency people protect the least. Many people live as if time is abundant and money is scarce. They guard their wallet, but give away their hours freely. They negotiate over price, but not over schedule. They get frustrated over being overcharged, but not over being overbooked. They measure the cost of things in dollars, but rarely in days. But a meaningful life is built by measuring cost in time, not money. If something consumes a year, it is expensive, regardless of its price tag. When you treat time as your wealth, you begin to ask different questions. Instead of asking, "How much does this cost?" you ask, "How much of my life will this require?" Instead of asking, "Can I afford this financially?" you ask, "Can I afford this energetically?" Instead of asking, "Is this a good deal?" you ask, "Is this a wise investment?" That mental shift alone will simplify your life more than any organizing system ever could. Time wealth is about allocation. How you allocate your hours reveals what you value, even when your words say otherwise. If you say you value health, but spend no time on movement, rest, or nourishment, the truth is in your schedule. If you say you value relationships, but spend no time with the people you love, the truth is in your schedule. If you say you value growth, but spend no time learning or practicing, the truth is in your schedule. Schedules do not lie. They expose priorities. But here is the good news. Priorities can be redesigned. You do not need to overhaul your entire life overnight. Even a small reallocation of time compounds into meaningful change. 10 minutes of reading a day becomes 60 hours a year. 20 minutes of exercise becomes 120 hours of movement annually. 15 minutes of focused work every morning becomes 90 hours of creation. Small commitments become large results when compounded through time wealth. There is another layer to treating time as wealth, protecting it. Time needs boundaries just like money does. People will ask for your time the way children ask for candy, without any awareness of cost or consequence. Not out of malice, but out of habit. And if you are not careful, your calendar will fill up with other people's priorities, requests, invitations, favors, meetings, obligations, errands, small things that seem harmless until you realize your life has been scheduled for you. Protecting time does not always require saying no harshly. Sometimes it requires saying no clearly. Sometimes it requires saying no early. Sometimes it requires saying no silently by never making yourself always available. Availability is not a virtue when it becomes self-sacrifice. A life without boundaries is a life lived for everyone except yourself. The opposite of protecting time is wasting it. Time can be wasted in obvious ways. Mindless scrolling, addictions, procrastination, shallow entertainment. But the most dangerous time wasters are disguised as productivity. If you are not careful, you can spend your days doing things that look productive, but do not move you closer to anything that matters. Busyness is not effectiveness. Activity is not progress. Time wealth requires the wisdom to distinguish motion from movement. Another dimension of time wealth is presence. You can spend time physically while being absent mentally. You can be at dinner while thinking about work. You can be with family while thinking about your phone. You can be on vacation while thinking about your inbox. Presence is not just being there. It is being here. This moment, this conversation, this breath. Presence multiplies time. It takes ordinary hours and turns them into memories, meaning, connection. There is also the future dimension. Time wealth considers the compounding effect of how you invest your hours today. Skills compound, knowledge compounds, relationships compound, health compounds. If you invest time into things that compound, your future self becomes wealthy in ways money cannot purchase. If you waste time on things that decay, your future self becomes poorer, no matter how much money you accumulate. And finally, treating time as wealth changes how you define success. Success stops being measured by how much you have and starts being measured by how much of your life is truly yours. A person with less money but more time freedom is often wealthier than someone with more money but no control over their schedule. The dream is not to be rich financially while being bankrupt in time. A dream is alignment, where your time funds the life you actually want to live. When you begin treating time as your wealth, something profound happens. Life slows down, simplifies, and opens up. You become intentional rather than reactive. You become present rather than distracted. You become directed rather than scattered. And the life you build begins to reflect not what the world pressures you to accumulate, but what you consciously choose to become. Chapter 7. The Pace of Purpose. Slowing down to go further. Speed has become the default setting of modern life. We rush to work, rush through tasks, rush through meals, rush through conversations, rush through goals. We even rush through rest, as if slowing down for too long might cause us to fall behind. But behind whom? Behind what? So much of our rushing is driven by fear. Fear of missing out, fear of losing relevance, fear of being outpaced, fear of not achieving enough fast enough. We equate speed with progress, but the truth is, speed without direction is just motion, and motion without meaning eventually leads to burnout. Slowing down is not laziness. Slowing down is not weakness. Slowing down is not a lack of ambition. Slowing down is strategy. It is the art of moving through life with intention instead of impulse. It is the recognition that the fastest path is not always the most effective one. If speed were all that mattered, the people who rushed the most would be the happiest and most fulfilled. But they are not. In fact, people who rush the most often feel the least satisfaction because rushing forces them to skim life instead of live it. When you slow down, you gain the ability to think. Thinking is underrated in a world obsessed with doing. Deep thought allows you to make better decisions, choose better opportunities, avoid unnecessary mistakes, and invest your time where it actually matters. A rushed mind cannot see clearly. It reacts instead of reflects. It repeats instead of innovates. It accumulates instead of curates. Slowing down gives you access to clarity, and clarity is a multiplier. There is also the emotional dimension. When you move too fast, you stop feeling. You stop noticing the subtleties of life, the warmth in a conversation, the beauty of a quiet morning, the satisfaction of a task well done, the comfort of being present with people you love. Busyness numbs these experiences. It takes richness out of life and replaces it with efficiency. Efficiency may help machines, but it drains humans. Humans are not designed to exist purely in output mode. We are designed to savor, absorb, and interpret life. One of the most powerful aspects of slowing down is that it improves the quality of your effort. When you rush, you multitask, you cut corners, you produce mediocre results, and you often have to redo things later. When you slow down, you give tasks the attention they need the first time. You create work you are proud of. You build discipline instead of urgency. You make fewer errors. High-quality outcomes require depth, and depth requires pace. This principle applies to goals as well. Many people choose goals based on how quickly they can be achieved. They want fast results, fast transformation, fast success. But meaningful goals rarely operate on fast timelines. Learning a skill takes time. Building a business takes time. Deep relationships take time. Character takes time. Health takes time. You cannot rush compounding. Compounding is earned slowly, quietly, and consistently. When you slow down, you allow compounding to work in your favor. Slowing down also gives you the opportunity to observe. You begin to notice patterns. What drains you? What energizes you? What distracts you? What moves you forward? You become a student of your own behavior. Self-awareness is a superpower, and it begins the moment you stop sprinting long enough to look around. Observation leads to insight, and insight leads to better choices. Better choices, compounded over time, deliver better lives. In relationships, slowing down is essential. You cannot build trust quickly. You cannot build intimacy quickly. You cannot build understanding quickly. The human heart does not operate on speed. It operates on presence. The more rushed your interactions, the more shallow they become. The more shallow they become, the less fulfilling they feel. Relationships are not fast food experiences. They are slow-cooked experiences. They require patience, attention, and time. When you choose to slow down, you also reclaim control from urgency. Urgency is one of the biggest manipulators in modern life. Everything feels urgent. Emails, notifications, deadlines, updates, demands. But true urgency is rare. Most urgency is manufactured. It is designed to pull you off your priorities and into someone else's agenda. When you slow down, you begin to question urgency. Does this actually need to be done now? Does this even matter? Those two questions alone can eliminate half the stress in your life. The irony is that slowing down actually makes you faster in the long term. It helps you avoid costly mistakes. It helps you choose better strategies. It helps you build sustainable habits. It prevents burnouts, so you do not have to constantly restart from zero. It allows you to build momentum steadily instead of sprinting and collapsing. In other words, slow is smooth, and smooth becomes fast. Finally, slowing down reconnects you with life itself. Simplicity is not just about having fewer things. It is about experiencing more of what is already in front of you. When life becomes less of a rush, it becomes more of a journey. You stop racing to the next milestone and start appreciating the step you are in. And in that appreciation, fulfillment takes root. Because fulfillment does not come from speed. Fulfillment comes from depth. Depth in work, depth in relationships, depth in experience, depth in self. And depth is only possible when you slow down. Chapter 8. The Courage of Clarity. Saying no with confidence. Your life becomes simpler the moment you realize you are not obligated to accept everything that comes your way. Most people do not drown because they jump into deep water. They drown because they keep saying yes to more than they can carry. Saying yes feels polite, cooperative, supportive, even ambitious. Every yes carries a cost. It costs time, energy, attention, and sometimes your peace. You cannot live a simple, intentional life if you are constantly signing yourself up to manage everyone else's priorities. From a young age, we are conditioned to believe that saying yes makes us helpful, likable, and successful. But over time, those yeses accumulate. They turn into commitments, expectations, and responsibilities that quietly shape your life. Before you know it, your schedule reflects other people's desires instead of your own. Your time belongs to whoever asks for it first. Your energy is spent not on what fulfills you, but on what obligates you. This is how life becomes complicated, not by force, but by consent. The irony is that people often avoid saying no because they fear disappointing others. But by avoiding that short moment of discomfort, they create a much longer period of burden for themselves. A 5-second no can save you from a 5-month obligation. A simple refusal can protect a year of mental bandwidth. The truth is, you will always disappoint someone. The question is, will you disappoint others occasionally, or yourself consistently? Saying no is not selfish. It is self-respecting. It is boundary-forming. It is clarity in action. When you say no, you are choosing to direct your life instead of allowing it to be directed for you. Consider every yes as a small contract. When you say yes, you are agreeing to give up a portion of your life. The only rational approach is to be selective. Selective with opportunities, selective with commitments, selective with access. This does not mean you should say no to everything. It means you should say yes only to the things that deserve your time, align with your values, contribute to your goals, or genuinely bring fulfillment. And when you do say yes, it should be a full yes, not a reluctant, guilt-driven, or fear-based yes. A life filled with shallow yeses leaves no space for deep commitments. It is depth that makes a life meaningful, not volume. One reason people struggle to say no is that they misunderstand generosity. Generosity is powerful, but real generosity has a structure. It has boundaries. A yes without boundaries is not generosity. It is self-erasure. You cannot pour endlessly without refilling. You cannot give meaningfully if you are depleted. Healthy giving comes from overflow, not obligation. The world does not need you to say yes to everything. The world needs you to show up well for the things that truly matter. Another reason people struggle to say no is the fear of missing out. Opportunities feel scarce. It feels dangerous to decline them. But the most successful and fulfilled individuals are not those who chase every opportunity. They are those who curate. They choose the few that align and ignore the many that distract. Opportunity is not valuable simply because it exists. It is valuable when it aligns with direction. The person who pursues everything advances nowhere. There is also the social pressure factor. Many requests come disguised as expectations, invitations to events, obligations to participate, pressure to match others' pace. But you are not responsible for satisfying every social script. You are responsible for designing a life that feels meaningful. A life that is crammed with obligations might look impressive from the outside, but internally it feels suffocating. Consider my friend Evelyn. For her entire adult life, Evelyn was the absolute cornerstone of her large family. She was the reliable woman who always said yes to absolutely everything. Every single November, she was expected to host the massive Thanksgiving dinner. She would spend 3 exhausting days cooking a 20-pound turkey, mashing endless pots of potatoes for 30 loud relatives. Her dining room was always packed tightly with extra folding chairs. She was completely drained before the first guest even walked through her front door. She kept doing it year after year simply because she was terrified of letting everyone down. She lived for their approval. She was letting the quiet fear of judgment completely dictate her golden years. But last autumn, something finally snapped. Evelyn was standing in her kitchen staring at a massive pile of dirty baking sheets. She realized she was actively dreading her absolute favorite holiday. So, she did something incredibly brave. She picked up her cell phone and typed a very short message into the family group text. She simply wrote, "I love you all so much, but I am not hosting Thanksgiving this year." She chose herself. She hit send and turned the phone completely off. She did not offer a long, complicated apology. She did not suggest an alternative plan. She just finally claimed her own peace. And a beautiful, surprising thing happened. Her family did not fall apart. Someone else simply stepped up to host the dinner. Evelyn finally discovered the profound magic of something called joome, the absolute joy of missing out. Instead of spending that week stressed and covered in flour, she spent a quiet Sunday afternoon sitting alone on her comfortable couch. She just sat there with a warm cup of tea, slowly reading a paperback novel in the afternoon sun. A packed schedule does not equal importance. We are so afraid of missing a single neighborhood event or disappointing a distant cousin that we miss out on our own peace of mind. Declining an invitation that drains your soul is not being selfish at all. It is a highly intelligent way of protecting your finite energy. Guard your empty hours fiercely. Learning to say no starts with learning to pause. Instead of responding instantly, ask yourself, is this worth exchanging part of my life for? If the answer is no, decline. If the answer is unclear, it is likely a no disguised as maybe. Very few yeses require urgency. Most yeses require honesty, and honesty requires time. There are polite ways to decline that do not damage relationships. I appreciate the offer, but I am not available. Thank you for thinking of me, but I need to pass. That sounds interesting, but it does not fit my priorities right now. Notice none of these require explanation or justification. A no without apology holds power. A no with clarity holds respect. When you begin saying no more often, you will notice something transformative. Your yes becomes more meaningful. Your commitments become deeper. Your presence becomes stronger. Your time becomes protected. The people who value you will respect your boundaries, and the people who only valued your compliance will fall away. That is a useful sorting mechanism. In the end, simplicity is not just about owning less or doing less. It is about agreeing less. Agreements shape your life. Agreements consume your days. Agreements determine your energy. The life you want is not built from the yeses you give out of fear or guilt, but from the yeses you give from clarity and intention. Say no more often, so the yeses you choose can actually take you somewhere. Chapter 9. Digital Quiet. Taming the Attention Thieves. Your phone buzzes. You glance at it reflexively, even though you were deep in important work just seconds before. The notification turns out to be meaningless. A social media like, a promotional email, a news alert about something you cannot control. But the damage is done. Your train of thought has derailed, and it will take 23 minutes to fully recover your focus. This scene repeats dozens of times daily for most people. We have become Pavlovian dogs, salivating at every digital bell. Our devices, once tools that served our intentions, have become masters that command our attention. We check our phones over 150 times per day, not because we need to, but because we have been programmed to. The term digital quiet might sound like an oxymoron in our hyper-connected world, but it represents something revolutionary. The intentional design of a technology environment that amplifies your signal while eliminating the noise. You are about to discover how to transform your devices from attention thieves into focus amplifiers. Every ping, buzz, and notification represents someone else's economic interest competing with your cognitive resources. Your attention has been commoditized, packaged, and sold to the highest bidder. Social media platforms, news apps, and even productivity tools use sophisticated psychological techniques to capture and hold your focus as long as possible. The business model is brutally simple. The longer they can keep you engaged, the more money they make. Variable reward schedules, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive, ensure you never know when the next dopamine hit will arrive. This uncertainty keeps you checking compulsively, hoping for something interesting, important, or entertaining. The cost of this attention theft extends far beyond lost time. Each interruption does not just steal the moment, it fragments your cognitive capacity for hours afterward. Research shows that even the mere presence of a smartphone reduces cognitive performance, even when it is turned off. Your brain allocates processing power to resist the temptation to check it, leaving less mental bandwidth for the task at hand. The deeper tragedy is what this constant stimulation prevents: the quiet moments where breakthrough thinking happens. Innovation requires sustained attention and the ability to sit with uncertainty long enough for insights to emerge. When you are constantly consuming microdoses of digital stimulation, you never develop the tolerance for the productive boredom that precedes creative breakthroughs. Your devices have trained you to expect instant gratification and constant novelty. This conditioning makes it increasingly difficult to engage in the slow, deliberate work that produces lasting value. You have become addicted to the shallow end of the attention pool, forgetting that the deep end is where the real treasures lie. The architecture of intentional technology. Digital quiet is not about rejecting technology. It is about reclaiming agency over how technology serves your goals. The key insight is that your default digital environment shapes your behavior more powerfully than your conscious intentions. Change the environment, and your behavior follows automatically. The principle of friction design becomes crucial here. By adding friction to distracting activities and removing friction from productive ones, you nudge yourself toward better choices without relying on willpower. When checking social media requires opening a browser and typing a URL, you will do it less often and when it is one tap away on your home screen. Notification management represents the first line of defense in creating digital quiet. Most notifications are neither urgent nor important. They are simply designed to recapture your attention. By ruthlessly curating what can interrupt you, you reclaim the right to direct your own focus rather than having it hijacked by algorithmic demands. The goal is not to eliminate all digital stimulation, but to make it intentional rather than compulsive. Instead of passively consuming whatever the algorithms serve you, you actively choose when, where, and how you engage with digital content. This shift from reactive to proactive technology use transforms your devices from masters back into tools. Another form of noise is the noise of opinions. Everyone today has something to say about how you should live, work, believe, behave, succeed, parent, spend, or dream. But no one else has to live with the consequences of your choices. Only you do. Listening to too many opinions makes your life blurry. You stop trusting your judgment. You start outsourcing your decisions. You become a patchwork of other people's expectations instead of a single expression of your own values. Opinions can inform you, but they should never command you. There is also the noise of comparison. Comparison is a constant whisper that tells you you are behind, you are lacking, you are failing, or you are not enough. Social media magnifies this whisper into a chorus. You compare your beginning to someone's middle, your routine days to someone's highlight reel, your inner world to someone's outer performance. But comparison is a thief with a charming disguise. It steals joy, motivation, and clarity. And for what? A scoreboard. No one agreed on, and no one wins. Then there is ideological noise, the noise of narratives, conflicts, politics, outrage, and controversy. The world loves drama. Drama sells. Drama spreads. Drama spreads. Drama stimulates. But constant exposure to outrage trains your brain to respond emotionally instead of rationally. It keeps you in a state of low-grade anxiety that never completely shuts off. Outrage creates noise. Peace creates clarity. And clarity requires you to carefully guard what you expose yourself to. Turning down the noise of the world does not require isolation. It requires filtration. It requires intentional boundaries. It requires developing the courage to disconnect without feeling guilty, to step away without feeling irresponsible, and to ignore without feeling uninformed. Quiet is not ignorance. Quiet is strength. It is the strength to protect your attention for what actually matters. Ultimately, when you turn down the noise of the world, you do not lose information. You gain clarity. You do not lose connection. You gain intimacy. You do not lose stimulation. You gain focus. You do not lose relevance. You gain direction. Noise tells you who to be. Quiet allows you to discover who you are. Chapter 10. Calm Spaces. Designing your environment for focus and peace. Walk into your workspace right now and count the objects within arm's reach. How many are essential to your current task? How many are remnants of past projects, future possibilities, or simple accumulation? If you are like most people, the ratio is sobering. Perhaps one essential item for every 10 distractors. Your environment is making decisions for you every moment of every day. That stack of papers whispers about unfinished business. The cluttered desk suggests chaos and overwhelm. The tangled cables create subconscious stress about disorder. You think you are just working in a messy space, but the space is actively working against your ability to think clearly and act decisively. The concept of calm spaces goes far deeper than aesthetic minimalism or trendy interior design. It is about transforming your physical environment into an interface, seamless bridge between intention and action. You are about to discover how the most productive people do not just organize their spaces, they architect them to make the right choices inevitable and the wrong choices invisible. Your brain processes visual information constantly, whether you are conscious of it or not. Every object in your field of vision requires a micro-decision, relevant or irrelevant, important or trivial, actionable or decorative. These micro-decisions accumulate throughout the day, creating a cognitive tax that depletes your mental energy without producing any value. Research in environmental psychology reveals that cluttered spaces increase cortisol levels, the stress hormone that impairs memory, reduces creativity, and makes complex thinking more difficult. Your messy desk is not just disorganized, it is biochemically sabotaging your performance. The visual noise of accumulated objects creates mental noise that interferes with clear thinking. The opposite is equally true. Clean, organized spaces reduce cognitive load and promote calm focus. When your environment contains only what you need for your current task, your brain can allocate its full processing power to the work itself rather than filtering out irrelevant stimuli. This is why libraries and meditation halls feel conducive to deep thinking. They eliminate visual distractions that compete for attention. But the influence of environment extends beyond mere distraction, where surroundings actively shape your behavior through subtle cues and nudges. A guitar leaning against the wall suggests music making. A book on the nightstand encourages reading. A clear desk with a single notebook open to a blank page invites writing. These environmental cues operate below the threshold of conscious awareness, gently steering your actions toward or away from your intended behaviors. The key insight is that willpower is finite, but environmental design is persistent. You cannot rely on motivation to overcome a chaotic workspace day after day. But you can design a space that makes productive behavior the path of least resistance, turning your environment from an obstacle into an ally. The interface principle. The most powerful spaces function like well-designed software interfaces. Everything you need is visible and accessible, while everything you do not need disappears entirely. This principle of progressive disclosure ensures that your environment reveals information and tools in proportion to their relevance to your current task. Your desk becomes a dashboard for your most important work. The tools you need daily live within arm's reach. Materials for your current project occupy the primary workspace. Everything else gets stored out of sight, but in logical, labeled locations where you can retrieve it quickly when needed. This approach requires thinking in terms of zones rather than rooms. Your work zone contains only work-related items. Your recovery zone holds books, comfortable seating, and perhaps a plant, but no work materials that might trigger task anxiety. Your connection zone facilitates conversation and relationship building without the distractions of unfinished projects or digital devices. Each zone cues a specific type of behavior through its contents and arrangement. When you enter your work zone, the environment immediately signals that it is time for focused productivity. When you move to your recovery zone, the space encourages rest and reflection. This environmental cueing reduces the mental effort required to shift between different modes of being. The magic happens in the transitions between zones, because each space has a clear purpose and contains only relevant items. Moving from work to rest or from creation to collaboration becomes a physical ritual that helps your mind shift gears. The environment does the heavy lifting of context switching, freeing your mental energy for the actual work. Chapter 11. Single Focus. Mastering the Art of Deep Work. Count the tabs open in your browser right now. How many applications are running on your computer? How many different projects are scattered across your desk? If you are like most people, the numbers are staggering. So is the hidden cost of this digital and physical chaos. You have been sold a lie about human capability. The myth that you can effectively juggle multiple tasks simultaneously has become so pervasive that we have forgotten a fundamental truth. Your brain was not designed to multitask. It was designed to focus intensely on one thing at a time, diving deep enough to produce work that matters. This chapter introduces the lost art of single focus, not as a productivity hack, but as a return to the natural state of human attention. You are about to discover why the most accomplished people in history were not those who could do many things at once, but those who could do one thing so completely that everything else became irrelevant. The multitasking mirage. Your brain is playing tricks on you. When you think you are multitasking, you are actually task switching, rapidly bouncing between different activities so quickly that it creates the illusion of simultaneity. But each switch comes with a hidden tax that compounds throughout your day. Research reveals the brutal mathematics of divided attention. When you split your focus between two tasks, you do not just have your effectiveness, you reduce it by much more. The cognitive overhead of switching contexts, reloading mental models, and recovering from interruptions can cut your productivity by up to 60%. What feels like efficient juggling is actually expensive fumbling. The quality tax is even more devastating than the time tax. Split focus multiplies errors exponentially. When your attention is fractured, you miss crucial details, make careless mistakes, and produce work that requires extensive revision. One clean pass with full attention beats 5 fragmented passes every time, both in speed and quality. Yet, the addiction to multitasking persists because it provides a dopamine hit that feels like productivity. Starting new tasks triggers reward circuits in your brain, creating the sensation of progress, even when you are not actually completing anything meaningful. This biochemical feedback loop keeps you switching between activities, chasing the high of initiation, while avoiding the deeper satisfaction of completion. The compound effect of this scattered approach extends beyond individual tasks. When you never settle into deep focus, you never develop the cognitive muscle memory that makes complex work feel effortless. You remain perpetually at the surface level of your capabilities, never discovering what you could accomplish with sustained, undivided attention. The architecture of attention. Single focus is not about working harder, it is about working with the grain of human cognition rather than against it. Your working memory can hold roughly 7 items simultaneously, but that is under ideal conditions. When you are stressed, tired, or distracted, that capacity drops dramatically. Single focus acknowledges this limitation and designs around it rather than fighting it. The key insight is that attention is not just limited, it is also trainable. Like a muscle that grows stronger with consistent exercise, your ability to sustain focus improves with practice. But this training requires deliberate structure, not just good intentions. You need systems that make single focus the default rather than the exception. This is where the concept of single threading becomes powerful. Instead of running multiple processes simultaneously like an overloaded computer, you run one process at a time until completion or a predetermined stopping point. This approach eliminates the cognitive overhead of context switching, while allowing your brain to build momentum and enter flow states. The magic happens when you combine single threading with visible commitment. By making your current focus explicit and public, even if only to yourself, you create accountability that prevents the drift toward distraction. Your attention becomes intentional rather than reactive, directed rather than scattered. Chapter 12. Engineering Ease. Building simple systems that keep you sane. Chaos is not always caused by lack of effort. Often it is caused by lack of structure. Most people are not overwhelmed because they are lazy. They are overwhelmed because their life requires constant decision-making, constant problem-solving, and constant reacting. Every day becomes a new negotiation with responsibilities, habits, and tasks that should already have a process. The result is decision fatigue, mental friction, and unnecessary stress. Systems are the antidote. Systems reduce chaos by reducing the number of decisions you need to make. When you build simple systems, you create order without having to force discipline every single day. A system is not a complicated software or a rigid routine. A system is simply a repeatable way of doing something, so you do not have to reinvent the wheel every time. You already use systems without realizing it. How you brush your teeth, how you make coffee, how you lock up your home before you leave. Those things do not require thought anymore because they have been standardized. Systems make things automatic, and when something becomes automatic, it becomes easier, faster, and less mentally expensive. One of the most powerful forms of simplicity comes from using systems to eliminate micro-stress. Micro-stress is the stress caused by tiny, constant decisions. What should I wear? What should I eat? When should I work? What should I do first? Individually, these decisions seem harmless. But when you make hundreds of them every day, they drain your cognitive energy. Decision fatigue does not make life harder. It makes life feel heavier. Systems remove that weight. When you build simple systems, you also remove the need for motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It fluctuates. It comes and goes based on mood, energy, weather, and emotion. Systems do not require you to feel inspired. They only require you to execute. That is why people who rely on motivation burn out quickly, while people who rely on systems build consistency quietly. Consistency does not come from hype. It comes from structure. Systems can be applied to every part of life: health, work, relationships, finances, chores, learning, and personal growth. For example, a health system might mean eating similar meals during the week so you do not spend your nights debating dinner. A financial system might mean automating savings so you do not rely on willpower. A work system might mean batching tasks so you are not switching between them all day. Every system reduces friction. Every system gives you back bandwidth. But the best systems are simple. Complexity is tempting, especially in a world that loves optimization and life hacks. But a complicated system is just another problem disguised as a solution. The purpose of a system is to make things easier, not impressive. The simpler the system, the easier it is to maintain. The easier it is to maintain, the more likely it is to succeed. Simplicity is a competitive advantage because it survives real life. Systems also protect you from chaos during low-energy seasons. Anyone can manage life when they feel strong, motivated, and well-rested. The real test comes when life gets heavy, when you are tired, when you are stressed, when you are juggling responsibilities, when challenges show up. Systems take over. When your willpower collapses, they catch you. They keep you operational. They keep your life from unraveling. A system is a quiet safety net. Another benefit of systems is that they free your mind for more meaningful thinking. When you do not have to obsess over logistics, you create mental space for creativity, problem-solving, connection, and reflection. Life becomes less about managing and more about living. Your brain is not meant to store reminders, schedules, and checklists. It is meant to think, imagine, and make decisions. Systems carry the boring part, so your mind is free for the important part. A powerful way to start building systems is to ask, what do I struggle with repeatedly? Wherever there is repetition, there is an opportunity for systemization. If you are repeatedly late, disorganized, overwhelmed, unprepared, or forgetful about something, that area does not need more effort. It needs a system. Systems succeed where willpower fails because systems do not get tired. And here is something rarely talked about. Systems reduce emotional friction in relationships. Many arguments between partners and family members are not about values. They are about logistics. Who will do what? When will it be done? How will it be handled? When there is no system, everything must be renegotiated. When there is a system, responsibility becomes automatic instead of argumentative. Less friction, more harmony. You do not need to overhaul your life to start building systems. Start small. Pick one area that drains you the most and design a repeatable process for it. Over time, these small systems stack, and your life becomes noticeably smoother. Days become less chaotic, routines become less stressful, and your mind becomes less cluttered. When you build simple systems, you are no longer at the mercy of chance, mood, or memory. You are engineering ease. You are removing friction. You are creating structure that supports the life you want to live. And in a world that worships complexity, that kind of simplicity is not only rare, it is sanity. Chapter 13. Depth over volume. Cultivating meaningful connections. Modern culture has tricked many people into believing that connection is a numbers game. More followers, more contacts, more group chats, more networking, more social circles, more invitations, more interactions. On the surface, it feels like richness. It feels like relevance. It feels like community. But quantity is a misleading metric. You can know hundreds of people and still feel lonely. You can talk all day and still not feel understood. You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. True connection does not come from volume. It comes from depth. Depth requires time, attention, vulnerability, and consistency. Those four ingredients cannot be spread thinly across dozens of relationships without losing potency. When you try to maintain social volume, you end up with relationships that are shallow, transactional, or performative. They remain at the level of updates and opinions rather than values and meaning. You know about each other's lives, but not about each other's hearts. You can converse for hours, but never touch anything real. And after it is over, you leave feeling entertained rather than nourished. Choosing depth means becoming intentional about who you give your social energy to. Not everyone needs access to your story, your struggles, your dreams, your fears, or your inner world. Access is not a default. It is a privilege. When everyone has access, no one has intimacy. Depth requires selective openness. It requires choosing a smaller circle where mutual trust, understanding, and growth become possible. One of the reasons people avoid depth is that depth requires vulnerability. Vulnerability is exposure. Vulnerability is uncertainty. Vulnerability is the risk of being misunderstood or rejected. So instead, many choose safety. They stay on the surface where nothing important is shared, and therefore nothing important can be hurt. But the safety of the surface comes at the cost of nourishment. Shallow relationships protect from pain, but they also block connection. No one feels deeply fulfilled by conversations that stay polite forever. Depth also requires patience. You cannot rush trust. You cannot microwave closeness. You cannot accelerate familiarity. Deep relationships form slowly through repeated interaction, shared experiences, and emotional sincerity. They require showing up not just for the highlights, but for the quiet, unremarkable, everyday parts of life. The world loves everything fast, but the heart loves everything slow. When you choose depth, you choose the pace that matches the heart instead of the pace that matches the algorithm. Choosing depth also means accepting that some relationships will not go there with you. Not because the other person is bad or unworthy, but because not every connection has the capacity or compatibility for depth. That is okay. Depth is not about forcing relationships. It is about filtering them. When you stop trying to make everyone a close friend, social clarity emerges. You begin to see who is aligned, who is reciprocal, who is supportive, who is curious about you, and who only wants to be entertained by you. There is also the matter of expectations. Social volume thrives on low expectations, quick replies, witty exchanges, convenience-based interactions. Depth thrives on higher expectations, honesty, loyalty, presence, and emotional courage. When you raise your relational standards, volume naturally decreases. Some people will drift away, some will quietly exit, some will lose interest. That is not a loss. It is a filtration. The ones who remain will give you what volume never could: meaning. An often overlooked benefit of choosing depth is that it reduces social anxiety. When you stop trying to maintain hundreds of weak ties, you free yourself from the invisible pressure of appearance, performance, and approval. You stop trying to impress and start trying to connect. You stop worrying about being interesting and start focusing on being interested. Shallow connections are exhausting. Deep ones are energizing. Depth also transforms conversations. Instead of talking about updates, gossip, trends, and headlines, you begin talking about fears, dreams, values, mistakes, goals, growth, philosophy, and truth. Conversation becomes a form of exploration rather than a form of entertainment. You learn more about yourself in the process. Good conversations are mirrors. They reflect back parts of you that you cannot see alone. This principle applies to romantic relationships as well. Many people seek intense chemistry, but chemistry without depth fades quickly. Depth builds compatibility. Depth builds understanding. Depth builds longevity. Chemistry sparkles. Depth stains. You can feel passion for many, but connection with few. Choosing depth also affects your digital life. The internet rewards volume. Social platforms encourage accumulation. Followers, likes, views, connections. But digital metrics rarely reflect real intimacy. You can be digitally visible and emotionally isolated at the same time. When you choose depth, you begin to use digital tools for alignment rather than validation. You message fewer people but have richer exchanges. You scroll less but reflect more. You observe more but compare less. At its core, choosing depth over social volume is an act of courage. It is easier to be liked by many than known by a few. It is easier to chat than to reveal. It is easier to perform than to connect. But easier rarely leads to fulfillment. Fulfillment comes from depth. Depth in relationships, depth in conversation, depth in commitment, depth in presence. When you begin choosing depth, social life does not shrink. It becomes real. The hollowness dissolves. The noise fades. The pressure to impress drops, and slowly, as depth grows, loneliness retreats. Not because you have more people, but because you finally have the right ones. In this beautiful season of life, you really only need to pour your remaining energy into 3 good people. Find those friends who do not require you to perform or pretend. The ones who will just sit on the porch with you and talk about the old days. Investing your precious time into a tiny circle of genuine love is infinitely better than spreading yourself thin for a crowd of strangers. They are enough. Chapter 14. Simplicity as a philosophy of freedom. Beyond tactics. Simplicity can begin as a tactic. Cleaning a drawer, organizing schedule, saying no more often, removing distractions. But tactics alone will not transform your life. For simplicity to become powerful, to become sustainable, to become freeing, it must evolve into a philosophy. A philosophy is not something you do occasionally. It is something that shapes how you think, how you choose, how you evaluate, and how you live. When simplicity becomes a philosophy, it stops being a phase and starts being an identity. Most people encounter simplicity as a reaction. They simplify because they are overwhelmed, because they are exhausted, because life has become too heavy, too busy, too loud, or too complicated. But reaction-driven simplicity is temporary. It fixes the immediate crisis, and then old habits return. That is why so many people declutter their homes, only to fill them again, or simplify their schedules, only to overload them again. Without a shift in philosophy, the environment changes briefly, but the mindset stays the same. A philosophy of simplicity asks a deeper question. What kind of life is worth living? Not in the poetic sense, but in the practical one. A life where you have space for relationships, for creativity, for rest, for growth, for health, for love, for presence. A life where you are not constantly rushing through everything just to get to the next thing. A life where value is measured not by accumulation, but by alignment. This is where true liberty resides, the freedom to define your life on your own terms. When simplicity becomes philosophical, it influences how you define success. Instead of judging success by how much you acquire, you begin to judge it by how much of your life is truly yours, how many of your days reflect your values, how many of your choices come from intention rather than obligation, how much time you have for what matters. The richest life is rarely the one with the most possessions, but the one with the least regret. One major shift that happens when simplicity becomes a philosophy is the recognition that trade-offs are unavoidable. You cannot say yes to everything and also live a meaningful life. You cannot maintain unlimited relationships and still have deep ones. You cannot chase every opportunity and still master one. You cannot consume infinite content and still hear your own mind. A philosophy of simplicity embraces limitation not as deprivation, but as selection. Selection is power. Selection is identity. Selection is freedom. Simplicity also changes how you relate to time. Time stops being something you squeeze productivity out of and becomes something you protect. You begin to see time not as an empty container to be filled, but as a resource to be honored. You slow down intentionally. You rest without guilt. You stop apologizing for boundaries that keep you sane. You stop believing that busyness is a badge of honor. Instead, you begin to admire spaciousness, clarity, and balance. Ancient spiritual traditions, from the Buddhist practice of mindfulness to the Christian call to humility and the Zen Buddhist concept of wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection, advocate for a simple life as a path to inner peace and fulfillment. These teachings remind us that simplicity is not just about decluttering our homes or schedules. It is also about decluttering our minds and hearts. It is about finding clarity and purpose and living in harmony with ourselves and the world around us. The philosophy of less is more teaches us that a simpler life is often a happier one. It is a philosophy that grants you the liberty to choose purpose over distraction, quiet over noise, and intrinsic joy over external validation. Another hallmark of a simplicity philosophy is detachment from external noise. You stop letting trends dictate your priorities. You stop letting comparison dictate your worth. You stop letting social pressure dictate your decisions. You begin to build a life that feels true, even if it does not look impressive. And that is rare in a world trained to value appearance over authenticity. But perhaps the most powerful shift is this: simplicity becomes proactive instead of reactive. You do not wait for life to get chaotic before you simplify. You simplify to prevent chaos. You do not wait for burnout before you rest. You rest to prevent burnout. You do not wait for clutter before you declutter. You curate so clutter never arrives. Simplicity becomes maintenance instead of repair. It becomes prevention instead of recovery. This philosophy also makes room for joy. When life is overcrowded, joy has no space to land. When life slows and simplifies, joy becomes more noticeable. Not dramatic joy, but quiet joy. The joy of presence, of clarity, of connection, of competence, of creativity, of enoughness. These forms of joy are small in appearance, but immense in impact. They are the kind of joy that accumulates in memories, not in selfies. To adopt simplicity as a philosophy, you do not need to abandon ambition. Ambition and simplicity are not opposites. In fact, simplicity strengthens ambition. When your life is not weighed down by clutter, physical, emotional, relational, or digital, you gain an extraordinary kind of focus. That focus lets ambition become deep instead of scattered. You pursue fewer things but achieve more through them. Philosophical simplicity also changes how you approach desire. You no longer chase things because they are available, trendy, or socially rewarded. You choose desires that align with your identity, your values, and your long-term meaning. Desire becomes filtered. And when desire becomes filtered, life becomes far less chaotic. The transition from tactic to philosophy is gradual. It starts with choices. Then it becomes habits. And then it becomes worldview. Eventually, it becomes ease. The ultimate goal of simplicity is not to own less, do less, or be less. The ultimate goal of simplicity is to be more present, more intentional, more free, and more alive. When simplicity becomes who you are, and not just what you do, life does not just get lighter, it becomes profoundly richer. Chapter 15. Living Light. Your New Identity. You have traveled through chapters of subtraction, elimination, and intentional design. You have learned to define enough, choose essentials, create time-space, maintain single focus, establish digital quiet, design calm spaces, and build bold boundaries. But knowledge without implementation is just sophisticated procrastination. The question now is not what you know, it is what you will do. This chapter is not about learning more principles or discovering new techniques. It is about transformation. You are about to discover how these individual practices weave together into a way of being that makes simplicity feel effortless rather than effortful. More importantly, you will understand why the person who finishes this audiobook and acts on it will be fundamentally different from the person who started listening to it. The journey from complexity to simplicity is not just about having fewer things or better systems. It is about becoming someone who naturally gravitates toward what matters and instinctively eliminates what does not. You are about to step into a new identity, one where living light is not something you do, but something you are. The 8 practices you have learned follow a precise sequence that builds momentum rather than just adding techniques. Each step creates the foundation for the next, forming a cascade of clarity that compounds over time. Enoughness establishes your boundaries, the edges that define where you stop, so you can start living intentionally. Without these limits, every other practice becomes temporary because there is no container to hold your progress. Your enough list becomes the constitution of your simplified life, the document you return to when pressure mounts and old patterns beckon. Essentials concentrate your power by identifying the vital few outcomes that deserve your finite attention. This is not about working harder on everything. It is about working smarter on the things that matter most. When you know your commanding objectives, every decision becomes binary. Does this advance my essentials or not? Time-space protects your capacity for deep work by creating buffers and boundaries in your schedule. Without protected time, even the clearest priorities remain theoretical. Your calendar becomes your commitment device, ensuring that your most important work gets your best hours rather than your leftover energy. Single focus transforms protected time into productive output by eliminating the cognitive overhead of task switching. This is not about working longer, it is about working deeper. When you can sustain attention on one task until completion, you discover capabilities you forgot you had. Digital quiet reclaims your devices as tools rather than masters by designing environments that support focus rather than fragmentation. Your technology begins serving your intentions instead of hijacking them with algorithmic demands for attention. Calm spaces extend this intentional design to your physical environment, creating interfaces that curate action and eliminate visual noise. Your surroundings become allies in your quest for clarity rather than obstacles to overcome. Bold boundaries protect everything you have built by ensuring that other people's urgencies do not become your emergencies. Your newfound clarity and capacity become sustainable because you have learned to say no to everything except what matters most. This is the compound effect of clarity. What you have learned is not just a collection of productivity techniques. It is a system for living that gets stronger over time. Each practice reinforces the others, creating what systems theorists call a virtuous cycle. The more you subtract, the clearer your priorities become. The clearer your priorities, the easier it is to focus. The better you focus, the better your results. The better your results, the more confident you become in your ability to choose what matters. This is the clarity dividend, the exponential return on your investment in simplicity. Unlike financial investments that might double your money over years, clarity investments can double your effectiveness in months. when you are no longer spending mental energy on irrelevant decisions, managing unnecessary possessions, or switching between competing priorities, that energy becomes available for breakthrough thinking and meaningful action. The transformation happens gradually, then suddenly. For weeks, you might feel like you are just organizing your life better. Then one day, you realize you are not just more organized, you are more capable. You are shipping projects that used to stall. You are having conversations that used to feel rushed. You are experiencing calm that used to feel impossible. This is not about perfection or permanent arrival at some simplified state. Life will always generate new complexity, fresh demands, and unexpected challenges. But you will have developed the muscle memory of subtraction, the instinct to eliminate rather than accumulate, the wisdom to protect what matters rather than chase what glitters. Perhaps the most surprising benefit of living light is what happens to your relationships. When you are no longer scattered across dozens of shallow commitments, you can be fully present for the people who matter most. Your attention becomes a gift rather than a distraction. Your presence becomes reliable rather than sporadic. The quality of your interactions improves dramatically when you are not mentally juggling competing priorities during conversations. People notice when you are truly listening rather than waiting for your turn to speak. They feel the difference between your distracted availability and your focused attention. Your follow-through becomes legendary because you only commit to what you can actually deliver. Instead of overpromising and under-delivering, you underpromise and over-deliver. This reliability becomes a competitive advantage in both professional and personal relationships. The deeper transformation happens in your relationship with yourself. You begin to trust your own judgment because your actions consistently align with your stated values. You develop quiet confidence because you are no longer constantly second-guessing decisions or feeling behind on everything that matters. The new you, the person who consistently applies these principles, becomes fundamentally different from the person who just knows about them. You will ship meaningful work on predictable schedules rather than hoping for inspiration to strike. You will reclaim 10 to 15 hours weekly, not by working less, but by eliminating the friction that makes work feel harder than it needs to be. You will feel lighter, not just because you own fewer things, but because you carry less mental weight. The background anxiety of unfinished projects, unclear priorities, and overwhelming options fades into calm focus. You will feel clearer about what matters and more confident in your ability to achieve it. Most importantly, you will feel calmer. The frantic energy of trying to do everything gets replaced by the steady momentum of doing what matters. You will move through your days with intention rather than reaction, purpose rather than pressure. These are not temporary improvements that fade when motivation wanes. They are structural changes to how you operate that become more automatic over time. You are not just learning new habits. You are becoming a new person, someone who naturally gravitates towards simplicity because you have experienced its power. The most powerful aspect of living light is how it becomes self-reinforcing. As your environment becomes calmer, your mind becomes clearer. As your mind becomes clearer, your decisions become better. As your decisions become better, your results improve. As your results improve, your confidence grows. As your confidence grows, you become bolder about eliminating what does not serve you. This creates what business strategists call a flywheel, a system that builds momentum over time until it becomes nearly unstoppable. Each turn of the wheel makes the next turn easier. Each act of subtraction makes the next one more obvious. Each boundary you maintain makes the next one feel more natural. The effort required to maintain your simplified life actually decreases over time. Your habits automate the daily decisions. Your environment cues the right behaviors. Your boundaries predecide how you will respond to requests and opportunities. What once required conscious effort becomes unconscious competence. This is why people who successfully simplify their lives rarely go back to their old patterns. It is not because they have superior willpower or discipline. It is because they have created systems that make the right choices easier than the wrong ones. They have designed a life that pulls them towards simplicity rather than pushing them toward complexity. A conclusion: the magic you have discovered, the promise of simplicity, has always been the same. When you remove what does not matter, what does matter finally has room to breathe. Throughout this audiobook, we explored how a life that is less crowded, less rushed, less reactive, and less burdened becomes a life that is more meaningful, more focused, more peaceful, and more fulfilling. Not because simplicity gives you more, but because it gives you more of what you actually need. The world will always push you towards more consumption, more commitments, more pressure, more speed, more noise. It will never voluntarily create space for you to think, to pause, to rest, to reflect, or to be intentional. That space has to be built by you. Simplicity is that building process. It is the conscious reclaiming of your time, energy, attention, and identity from forces that would otherwise scatter them. A simple life is not a small life. It is not a life without ambition, curiosity, or achievement. In fact, simplicity strengthens ambition by removing the distractions that dilute it. It strengthens relationships by reducing the social clutter that crowds intimacy. It strengthens creativity by freeing mental bandwidth. It strengthens self-respect because you are no longer abandoning yourself for every demand that shows up. Simplicity does not shrink life. It sharpens it. It makes life more deliberate. The real challenge is not understanding simplicity. It is sustaining it. Anyone can simplify when overwhelmed. Anyone can declutter when stressed. Anyone can pause when burned out. But to make simplicity a philosophy, you must make it a choice. Even when things are going well, you simplify not just to escape chaos, but to protect clarity. You choose less not because you are deprived, but because you are selective. You say no, not because you are antisocial, but because you are aligned. Simplicity continues to reveal its benefits the longer you practice it. You begin to notice that peace is not a luxury. It is a result. Presence is not an accident. It is cultivated. Fulfillment is not found. It is designed. And time is not just something you use. It is something you honor. When life slows just enough for awareness to enter, you start seeing the patterns that shape you. You begin choosing those patterns instead of inheriting them. In a culture that constantly encourages accumulation, simplicity asks a better question. What is enough? Enough is the moment you stop believing you need to prove your worth through possessions, through productivity, through perfection, or through performance. Enough is the moment you release the pressure to impress and begin the journey to live. Enough is where anxiety ends and living begins. If there is one final truth to carry with you, it is this: a meaningful life is not the result of what you add, but what you remove. You remove the noise to hear yourself again. You remove the excess to find clarity again. You remove the distractions to feel purpose again. You remove the unnecessary so the necessary can shine. Simplicity is not disappearance. It is distillation. It distills your life down to the essentials: the people you love, the work that matters, the values that guide you, the habits that sustain you, the dreams that feel true to who you are becoming. When you make space for those things, life becomes richer, not because it becomes bigger, but because it becomes truer. You do not need to wait for the world to quiet down. The world may never quiet down, but you can turn down the noise. You can choose slower rhythms. You can choose deeper relationships. You can choose selective ambition. You can choose clear priorities. You can choose a life that is light enough to carry and meaningful enough to be proud of. Your first move towards this liberated life begins today, not with a massive overhaul, but with 3 simple actions. First, write your enough list. Take 10 minutes right now to establish caps for your possessions, projects, meetings, apps, and social commitments. Make these numbers specific and write them down. This is not about finding the perfect limits. It is about establishing any limits at all. You can adjust them later, but you cannot benefit from boundaries that exist only in your head. Second, empty one surface and one digital folder completely. Choose your desk or kitchen counter and remove everything except what you need for today's most important task. Then, pick one cluttered folder on your computer and either delete or properly organize every file. These small acts of subtraction will give you an immediate taste of the calm that comes from intentional space. Third, block tomorrow's first 90-minute deep work session in your calendar. Treat this appointment with yourself as seriously as you would treat a meeting with your most important client. Decide tonight what you will work on during this session and prepare your environment so you can start immediately. This single block of protected time will demonstrate the power of time, space, and single focus. These 3 actions take less than 30 minutes, but create the foundation for everything else. They are not the complete transformation, but they are the beginning of it. They are your declaration that you are ready to live differently, to choose simplicity over complexity, to become someone who subtracts rather than accumulates. You have reached the end of this audiobook, but you are standing at the beginning of a new way of living. The principles you have learned are powerful, but they are powerless without your action. The techniques are proven, but they are worthless without your implementation. The transformation is possible, but it is not inevitable. The difference between people who read about simplicity and people who live it comes down to this moment. Will you close this audiobook and return to the complexity that brought you here? Or will you take the first step toward the clarity, focus, and calm that you now know is possible? The choice seems obvious, but it is not easy. Your old patterns will call you back. Your environment will resist change. Other people will question your new boundaries. The path of least resistance leads right back to where you started. But you are not the same person who started listening to this audiobook. You have seen behind the curtain of complexity and discovered that most of it is optional. You have learned that the secret to having more is not accumulating more, but needing less. You have discovered that the path to doing everything is choosing to do the essential few things extraordinarily well. You now possess something most people never develop: the knowledge and tools to design a life rather than simply react to circumstances. You can choose your constraints rather than having them chosen for you. You can direct your attention rather than having it hijacked by algorithms and other people's agendas. The person you are becoming, someone who lives light, thinks clearly, and acts decisively, waiting for you to take the first step. That person has been there all along, buried under layers of accumulated complexity. Every subtraction reveals more of who you really are. Every boundary protects more of what you truly value. Every moment of focus brings you closer to your essential self. The world needs people who can think deeply in an age of distraction, who can focus intensely in an era of fragmentation, who can choose wisely in a time of infinite options. It needs people who have learned to live light while carrying the weight of important work. It needs people like the person you are about to become. Less is more is not a slogan. It is a compass. And if you follow it, not only will your life become simpler, it will become unmistakably yours. Cut once, feel the quiet, defend it fiercely. Winners subtract,